Since 2013, I've been the most attacked public figure in British public life. You've seen some of it, the pictures of milkshakes, etc. But frankly, the British public don't know the half of it. Physical attacks and, of course, verbal threats online. Cars vandalised, cars even written off. Attacks, dangerous attacks on the family home. Throughout all those years, I asked for help from the Home Office. None was ever provided of any kind at all.
Picture doing your job with a panic button in your pocket, a police contact on speed dial, and a very real chance that being kind enough to meet the public face-to-face could be the last thing you ever do. That is not a dramatized opening line. That is simply Tuesday for a growing number of British politicians. Good day and welcome back to British Insider, because today we are looking honestly at something far heavier than the usual Westminster squabbling. The sheer scale of violence and threats now aimed at the people who represent us. Right, a quick favor before we continue, because this one deserves your full attention afterwards. If you find value in this channel, hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell while you are there. Over 90% of you watching have not yet, and honestly, it costs nothing, takes 1 second, and genuinely helps this channel keep doing this kind of work. Right. Favor asked. Now let us talk about the numbers nobody wants to say out loud.
When I did finally become an MP, they actually removed most of it a year in to doing that job. But the murder of Ann Widdecombe has put everything into a completely new context. And it's why what Zach Polonski, the leader of the Green Party, did yesterday in posting on Instagram, we're only making plans for Nigel with a guillotine, is nothing less than incitement. I have reported this to the Metropolitan Police. Can you imagine if I'd said something as insightful as that? I mean, goodness me, I'd be in handcuffs as we speak. I've had no apology from Polonski. The Met Police tell me they're dealing with the case. But frankly, if people want to criticise me for having been given money to make sure I'm safe for the rest of their lives, well, they can criticise all they like. I explain this and more exclusively for the Daily Mail in this article.
3 politicians, 1 decade. That is the grim tally Britain now carries. Joe Cox, murdered in 2016 while heading to meet constituents, David Amess, murdered in 2021 doing exactly the same, and this month, former MP Ann Widdecombe, killed in a targeted attack that has left Parliament once again standing to pay tribute to a colleague taken far too soon. 3 names is not a coincidence, it is a pattern, and patterns demand answers rather than sympathy alone. And the pattern runs far deeper than headline tragedies, because a parliamentary survey found that 96% of MPs who responded have personally faced threatening behaviour or communication since taking office. Not the odd rude email either. Over a third reported threats of physical harm, and more than a quarter said they had received actual death threats. Recorded crimes against MPs have climbed from just 151 back in 2017 to close to 1,000 last year alone, roughly a 10-fold increase in under a decade, while reports of death threats specifically have tripled since 2019. Picture a job where nearly every single colleague in the building has faced a genuine threat to their safety, and ask yourself how many other professions we would simply accept that statistic from without demanding immediate change. These are not abstract numbers either, because real MPs have put real, painful detail behind them. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman has revealed she still requires around-the-clock personal protection, recalling being verbally abused with vile language in front of her own children during an ordinary supermarket visit. Sussex MP Maria Caulfield has described having her tyres slashed and her office graffitied, admitting she once brushed off threats until Joe Cox's murder forced her to take every single one seriously. And Kim Leadbetter, who took over her sister Jo's old seat in Parliament, has spoken candidly about fearing that lightning really could strike twice, worrying less for herself for what another tragedy would do to her parents and to Jo's own children. So why, with statistics this stark, does so much of this abuse simply continue unpunished? Here's the uncomfortable answer, straight from Parliament's own Speakers' Conference on Security. Current law leaves what investigators politely call broad scope for people to abuse MPs and candidates without technically breaking any law at all. Existing electoral law has been openly labelled not fit for purpose, with campaigners calling for home addresses to be properly protected, candidate identities properly verified, and the disinformation that so often fuels these attacks finally taken seriously. And the danger is not evenly spread either, because Electoral Commission data shows female candidates face twice the threat level of their male colleagues, while candidates from ethnic minority backgrounds face triple the risk, a genuinely uncomfortable inequality hiding inside an already uncomfortable story. Nor is this confined to one side of the political divide, which rather undercuts anyone tempted to treat it as a partisan talking point. Just this month, a death threat against Nigel Farage himself resulted in a real arrest, proof that this particular storm shows no interest whatsoever in party allegiance. And that raises the genuinely thorny question of rhetoric itself, because language that dehumanizes political opponents rarely stays neatly contained within a television studio or a conference stage. It seeps outward into pub conversations, comment sections, and eventually, tragically, into real-world violence. There's also a rather glaring inconsistency worth naming here, because while ordinary members of the public can face prosecution for threatening messages sent to an MP, senior politicians using genuinely inflammatory language about entire communities have, on more than one occasion, faced remarkably little consequence beyond an awkward headline. If the rules only bite downward and never upward, that's not equal enforcement, that's simply a very expensive illusion of one. On the funding side, ministers have already responded with a security package running into the tens of millions of pounds, covering panic alarms for candidates, a named police contact for every hopeful standing for office, and a promise that any request for help gets assessed within 24 hours. That money matters, and nobody sensible would argue otherwise, but funding alone cannot rewrite a culture that keeps treating elected officials as acceptable targets rather than public servants doing an increasingly dangerous job. And several MPs who welcomed the cash have been equally blunt that a panic button doesn't fix a society that has grown comfortable hating people it disagrees with. Because ultimately, this is not simply a story about individual safety, however serious that already is. It's a question of whether decent people will still choose to stand for office at all, once family barbecues and school runs come with genuine security risk attached. One sitting MP put it about as plainly as anyone could: allow this culture to keep winning, and it becomes, in her own blunt words, deadly for democracy itself. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.